We need some additional energy resources to address the vulnerability, liability, and faith because of its transmission line setup.
All right, so somebody has some noise going on in the background before we officially start. If you can put yourself on mute. All right, perfect. That's perfect. Okay, so we have a quorum and Debbie is here, who is the most important person on the call other than John and our new member, Josh. So, all right, I'm going to officially start the Alternative Energy Committee meeting at 7:31. Thank you everybody for being here. I have to say, John, clearly this topic is important to this town because this is the biggest meeting we've ever had.
Uh-oh, I'm in trouble then.
No, not in trouble at all, but we're very excited to have you here to talk about municipalization and what it requires and what it's going to take if we were to pursue that path. And also what it means, because I think there are a lot of flavors of municipalization and hopefully you can talk about that. But first, what we're going to do is 2 orders of business. One is to approve the meeting minutes from our last meeting and to introduce the newest member of the Alternative Energy Committee. So the first thing I want to do is introduce our newest member of the Alternative Energy Committee, Josh Staunton. Thank you for coming, and I'm so glad you came here. And I didn't send you an invitation, so that just tells me that you're enthusiastic and paying attention and you know how to be involved. So I'm assuming you got sworn in by the clerk.
Yes.
I'm so happy to have you.
Thank you.
Could you give a little bit of background on yourself? And
Sure.
then we'll do the minutes.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, and thanks, Corey. Corey kind of sent it over to me, but yeah, excited to be here. Initially threw my hat in the ring for the facilities because I know there's some talk about building some new buildings and wanted to just be part of that, make sure we're trying to make them as environmentally efficient as possible and incorporating some renewable energy on those new buildings if we do make new school or whatever. But I didn't get that one, and then Corey's like, hey, would you be interested? You mentioned something about renewable energy, would you want to be on the AEC? And that was a great thing for me, so I was excited to be part of this and just see where I could help. But I live over on Hammond Ave. Been here about 6 years, grew up in Hingham, was in the Marine Corps, and then got my MBA, and I studied green entrepreneurship. I still haven't figured that part of my life out yet, where I figured out some kind of green company yet. But this is a great way to just get involved and something I'm passionate about. So glad to be here.
Well, we're glad to have you. Welcome.
Welcome.
So just since we have so many people, quickly do introductions of the committee. We have this in meeting format, which is great. So I'm Tanya Bodell. I'm the chair of the executive committee, chair of the Alternative Energy Committee. And I have been an advisor to the energy industry for more than 30 years. So this is a volunteer position that's very close to my heart. I've been on the advisory committee for 6 years. I have a finance background and MBA from MIT. Very happy to be able to apply that to the things we're doing. And I had a stint on the Alternative Energy Committee previous to the advisory committee. Do we want to go then Pat, who is our vice chair, followed by Debbie?
Hi, Pat Gooding. I've been with the AEC off and on for 6 years, I think now. And I won't go you through my whole life history, but I also have an MBA and was in the financial services industry for about 27 years. So I don't bring an energy background to this. I bring a business and a program management background. I'll
Perfect.
turn it over to someone.
Perfect. Debbie. Debbie Cook, you're on mute.
So I also have a MBA, but I mostly have worked in the environmental field, and I volunteered and been a part of many of the committees in town, including the Open Space Committee that I chaired. We wrote the first open space plan. I chaired the Conservation Commission, was on the Master Planning Committee. We just have been on a number of committees, but there was a long hiatus, and then I really wanted to get on the Alternative Energy Committee because I think there's probably more things that can be accomplished here than just about anywhere to make a difference in actually the future going forward.
Perfect. So those are the 4 from our committee. I want to also call out and thank for attending our longtime liaisons from the Water Commission, Steve Girardi, from the Advisory Committee, Fran Collins. We also have Lydia St. Ange from the School Committee, because this is a multidisciplined set of endeavors that we're engaged in. So it's great to have our liaisons with us. We also have our liaison from the Select Board, Corey Evans, and we have 2 additional members of the Select Board on, which most certainly is great to see. We have Jean Healy-Dippold and Carrie Thompson, the chair of the Select Board. So thank you for joining us. And I am not great at politics, but I know there are so many other important people who are attending, and I want to thank you. So at this point, let's quickly go to the meeting minutes. Hopefully everybody on the committee has reviewed them. I know, Josh, you can't vote on this since you were not in attendance because you just started. But take a moment to review, and if I could get a motion to approve in a second, we'll then have discussion. All right, is there a motion to approve?
Motion to approve impeccable minutes. Thank you, Debbie.
Oh, thanks.
Thank you, Pat. I will second that, along with the comment about the impeccable minutes, Debbie.
Thank you.
All right, we have to do a roll call vote. All in favor, I'll start. Tanya Bodell, aye.
Pat Gooding, aye.
Debbie Cook, aye.
And I think that's all that we have. We'll have Josh, if you want to officially abstain, you can do that too, but you have to do it verbally.
I thought you said, so I am being included. You want me to?
I'll include you, but you have to say I abstain. because I
Okay.
wasn't.
All right, I abstain.
Okay, perfect. All right, meetings pass with 1 abstention and three meeting unanimously. Thank you. We will move forward with that. This will be posted tomorrow. All right. The next order of business is our speaker. And this has been something we've done almost every meeting. We've had a speaker who speaks for the first 30 minutes. John, I fear you're going to go over the 30 minutes. So we're going to give you a little bit of extra because this is a topic that is of great interest, especially since we just had, in some cases, a 6-day outage for some of the people in town. Municipalization is something that the Alternative Energy Committee has been asked to explore. We are also exploring other options like a mini grid, which we are pursuing with a Bric grant, which we will also explain. A Bric grant is a FEMA, Federal Emergency Management Agency grant. It stands for Building Resiliency and Infrastructure in the Communities, a Bric grant, and they provide 75% of requested funding for different projects tied to reliability, resiliency, dealing with hazard mitigation, and important things. So, Fran, that is what that Bric grant is about. We are pursuing one. We presented to the Select Board on Tuesday. We will have an update on that. But what we're going to talk about now is one of the alternatives that we are looking at instead of a microgrid, which could potentially be municipalization. But frankly, municipalization might be needed even if we get the Bric grant, because we will be potentially owning a lot of batteries and generation resources. And so it may make sense to become a municipal light company or municipal electric company to hold those assets and create revenues and potentially charge the beneficiaries as needed. But there's all sorts of flavors, I believe, of these municipalization opportunities. And thankfully we have John here, thanks to Mike Schmidt, who is not even in attendance yet, but we have John here to talk about it. John, I'm not even going to attempt to talk about all of your background. I'm going to let you do that
Oh,
at
great.
the very beginning, but you were like the perfect person to come and speak on this topic. So thank you for joining us, and we're so happy you're here.
I appreciate that. And Mike is definitely going to hear it that he couldn't get, on the call since he asked me to do this. But no, my background goes, it's 30, now I'm going to date myself. It's like 34 years in the energy business. I have a power systems engineering degree from WPI, and I also have an MBA on top of that. But my background and where I started was in utility engineering and operations and all that. I spent quite a bit of time at what used to be Commonwealth Electric that merged with Boston Edison to become what you guys know now as Eversource, not who feeds you guys, but one of the larger players. I was the director of substations there for 5 years. After that, I left and went to Hingham, where I luckily hired Steve at some point, even though he's listening to something else. So I kind of span the investor-owned utility and municipal utility field, seeing the differences between the two, how they operate, what gets done. So from that perspective, Tanya, I'll give you that I'm a good speaker at, for something like this. I left Hingham and became the president and CEO of Energy New England, which Hingham has a stake in. There are 6 municipal owners of it. It's on the slides. I'm going to pop up real quick, and I'm really going to limit even my discussion about what E&E is, even though it has some relevance here, because I think we really want to get to the main topic. And this is not a pitch for Energy New England, but let me pop that up real quick. And if anybody has any questions, I guess, Brianna, do we use the raise hand function? Is that what we want people to do, or?
Sure. Does everyone know that where the raise hand function is? If you click on participants, you should have a more option. Actually, it's not the same for me because I'm the host. I don't know. I think the raise hand option though should be on your bottom screen. Corey, that's one way to do it if you want to react with an emoji.
So there's it's under reactions. So it is reactions, and there's a raise hand or an emoji or other things. So
Thank you.
and either Brianna, you can call them. You might see people faster than or I can call them, but why don't we jointly moderate just to make sure that we're able to get. Also, if anybody wants to put a question in the chat, you can put a question in the chat, and I see there's already a note there. But yes, thank you, John. We'd like this to be interactive, but we also want you to take the lead. So Brianna, does he have the ability to share at this point?
Yes, he does.
Okay, great.
Okay, because it's telling me that it failed to start, and I don't know why.
Oh, try again.
Let me go back out and see. Let's see. Nope, same thing.
I can make you a co-host and we can see if that's different. All participants should be able to share.
Let's see, who can share when someone else is sharing? Let's see if we can get this up. Let's see. Nope, same thing.
So
You know what?
Brianna, I have sharing capability, so maybe you need to knock me off and give that to John.
Well, no one's sharing right now. So I think I'm not sure if, John, Tanya, do you have John's presentation? Would you be able to share?
No,
that?
because I didn't send it to her because I just figured we'd be able to share it.
You should be able to share it. Let's try it one more time, and then we'll find another solution while John starts talking.
Okay.
If you want to send it to us, and we can keep it. Well, I guess we can't keep it confidential if you send it to us, but you are being recorded anyway, so this is open meeting laws.
No, it's still not doing it.
Okay. Are you able to exit out of it and just try to go back onto it?
I did. I tried that a couple of times.
Okay.
Let me send it to Tanya here. Let's see if we can do that real quick.
All right.
Oh,
Oh my God, the pressure's on, John.
I know. I can just feel it.
Send it to me.
Let me see if I am able to share my screen. Okay, it works on my end. I believe everyone just saw that.
Yep, you can send it to Brianna and myself, and whoever, Brianna, maybe you can try it first since you're the host.
All right, let's see. Oh, this is getting. Try it now. You shut down everything else. All right, get rid of that. Advanced. Share all participants. So it's letting all participants share. There's the presentation. Oh, all right. I'll try to send it to you while I'm talking because I don't want to take up all of people's time. Energy New England is a Massachusetts cooperative made up of 6 municipal utilities. There was 4 in the beginning. 1998, the state restructured. When the state restructured, the municipal systems were kind of left out on their own. They were not subject to having us eliminate our generation or sell generation like the IOUs had to. We didn't have to divest of certain things, so they stayed vertically integrated. But with the advent of potential markets out there, the whole ISO New England and purchasing energy and so on, a couple of folks felt like it was good to put a shared services company together. So today, that's really what Energy New England is. We have the most expertise, I would say, in purchasing energy, creating portfolios for systems, and being able to procure, especially now, renewable or non-emitting energy for our clients. There are 41 municipal systems or municipal utilities in the state. They represent 50 communities. A few of them have multiple communities. So there's 50 of those. The last one created was 1926, and that was Chester, which has, I think, 600 customers, give or take. Devens, if anybody's familiar with Devens, there used to be an air base and so on way back when. They are a quasi-governmental entity, and they were given the ability to act like a municipal utility for purchasing wholesale energy. So when we talk about municipalization, we're talking about over 100 years ago when the last one was created. So that's why it's not as simple as we think. Let me see if I can just send this to you now when I'm talking. So as you can see, from 100 years ago, and I apologize. I thought this would be a little bit simpler than it actually is, because it's actually on our server at the office, and that's maybe what's causing the problem. So I'm going to skip the whole E&E thing and discussion, because you'll see it in the presentation. And I don't think, Tanya, there's anything in here that is sensitive, so to speak.
Mhm.
So it would be fine if we share it with the committee. Municipal light plants themselves, the current ones and the ones that were created, are governed under Mass General Law, Chapter 164. That is an extremely, extremely lengthy law. But in there, if you start with section, show your entire screen. Okay, let me try that. No, even that didn't work. The idea.
Yeah, I suspect that there's probably some firewalls preventing us from doing this. I'm wondering, John, are you able to talk? You can talk off the top of your head on this topic, I'm sure, for days and days. Do you want to just move forward and then we can worry about the presentation?
I would, because I don't want to tie people up, and I'd rather have a conversation anyway.
Yeah.
The presentation is just for you to have. It may generate some more questions. I can always come back and answer them, or you guys can send them to me. That's not a real problem to do, but I would much, much rather have a conversation with folks here. But, so there's a whole way that municipal light plants are governed. The process of becoming one, and Tanya described it to a certain degree, there are multiple potential ways to become a light plant or a municipal system. The electric side, though, which is kind of what we want to focus on and what part of the discussion is tonight, that's the one that hasn't been tested and has not created a new one since that 1926 timeframe. There are several in the last 7 to 10 years that have been created, especially out in Western Mass, under the guise of Chapter 164, but it's all for telecommunications. There's a big push in Western Mass to have, internet to the home or last line of service to the home for telecommunications. So folks out there have created what look like quasi municipal light plants for that particular purpose. The reason why there hasn't been any opposition to that is because the telecom companies aren't serving those people anyway. When you start to talk about Cohasset itself wanting to become a municipal light plant like the other 41 that I was mentioning earlier, this is where we rub against the investor-owned utilities. There has been, I want to say, since 2005, and it's in the presentation too, there's been a bill to try to create or have a process to create more municipal utilities. It has failed all 8 times. It has never gotten out of committee. It started really, if anybody remembers, back in 2008 with the ice storm in Central Mass with Fitchburg, Lunenburg, and a couple of the small systems out there, took Unitil to task on this and filed a bill to try to become a municipal utility, or those systems. Ashby was the other one, to become a municipal utility. Not with a lot of success, to be perfectly honest with you. And there's several reasons for this. The utilities that exist today are kind of self-sustaining. And what I mean by that is, if you look at where Steve is in Hingham, Hingham is fed by 2 lines that come in on a right-of-way by the rail track, but Hingham itself is self-contained. It doesn't tie electrically to Weymouth. It doesn't tie to Norwell or anything like that. So one of the real issues with trying to become a municipal system from a technical point of view, never mind, and I'll get into some of the other things, but from a technical point of view, is that Cohasset is fed by probably multiple electrical stations and lines, whether they're distribution lines or transmission lines. So from a technical point of view, it is very difficult to cut those off. The easiest one, and the easiest way for maybe me to explain it, is if you take a look at Cape Cod. Cape Cod has the canal, right, that cuts the mainland from the Cape. There are lines that cross the canal. That would be the easiest one to municipalize, because you can put a point of demarcation at those lines that cross the canal. So that's the technical problem or technical aspect. The other one is there is no true process for evaluating the system. So what I mean by that is Cohasset has assets that National Grid owns in the town, right? Poles, wires, any other kind of electrical transformers, whatever it might be. What's typically happened is anybody that's gone down this path has ended up in a discussion with the utility where the utility asks for full replacement value of those systems, even though they potentially could be depreciated over the period of time they've been there. And that number is significant. It's in the millions. And depending on the size of the town, it could be in the hundreds of millions. But there is no process in Massachusetts that creates a mechanism to evaluate this, where a third party, let's just say the DPU, could step in and kind of either negotiate something or come up with a fair way to do it. Jean has her hand up.
So I did have a quick question about that, because the statute directs that, I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, that there is an accounting for obsolescence and depreciation. And it looks like that was a litigated component of the Western Mass light systems. And so wouldn't a similar analysis apply in the electric systems?
You would hope it would. It has not to this point. Let's put it that way. So to your point, there are some things written in there but it has never been pushed beyond that on the electric side. And I'll be honest with you too, very few people, the last group to really push this, because it never went anywhere with the ice storm folks from Lunenburg, Ashby, and Fitchburg, was Lexington. And that goes back to 2004. And they tried this process. So since then, no one's really attempted this on the electric side. And again, it becomes not only a financial issue, right, for the town, bonding the money or doing whatever they have to, if they can come to an agreement on a price, but it also becomes a very technical issue with how you would be able to do this. It's not as easy as it would seem, unfortunately. And it so the advent of what's happened now in Western Mass and those type of things may open a little bit of a door. There is a House bill, House 3331, that was filed again this year. It's a refile of the same bill that's gone down 8 times already. This one only has 5 sponsors, and that kind of surprises me to a certain extent. But if you look at what we were talking about, there's 50 communities that are actually light plants. That means there's 301 that are not. And the state legislature, as we know, is split up right amongst those. So unless you have a real push from the legislature or from the folks who can make a difference with these bills, it becomes very difficult to get this passed at the moment. So I don't know if that answers your question, Gene, or not, but it has not been taken all the way to the DPU to see if they would rule on an either actuarial basis or an asset valuation, including and up to either obsolescence or retirements or those type of things. The other thing they'll throw in there, and they have in the past, is lost opportunity or stranded investment where they would get it back. Now, again, that also varies by town too. We're not talking about the city of Boston with some of these places, right? Which draws a significant amount of energy and revenue to them, but all that gets thrown into the mix. And that's what complicates this even more. Tanya.
Thanks, John. So, as Jean referenced, legally, a town can become a municipal light company under one statute. We can buy the distribution system assets from, say, National Grid under another part of the law that is legally allowed. But what I'm hearing you say, and I just want to make sure I understand this, is what you're saying, that just because you can do it doesn't mean it's easy, and the issue is the negotiated price.
Correct. And that's been the first sticking point that people haven't got beyond. And then if you were ever to be able to do that, the other question becomes, what assets are they selling to you? Everything at the town line of Cohasset? And they can't just cut that off, and neither can you, or you'll have no energy yourself unless you're gonna, God forbid, build something and self-sustain, which is not gonna happen, right? The only other community I know currently that could probably island themselves is the town of Braintree. Town of Braintree has enough generation where they could island themselves if they had to. They never will, because it just doesn't make sense for the system. But they also go back to 1898 or 1897. And have always had generation. So
Right. So we have 2 feeder lines that
Yep.
are 100% the town. And then we have a tiny little stub running down South Main Street. One feeder
Yeah.
line comes from a substation in Situate, another comes
Yep.
from a substation in Norwalk.
and the Norwell one's probably on Mount Blue.
And it
If I
comes through
remember the
Wampatuck Park.
Yeah, so if I
Yeah.
remember that comes out of Mount Blue Station then in Norwell. The issue with that is, without those 2 lines and the fact that they go through another town becomes another issue. Because how do you compensate the town for that? If you look at, say, Hingham's the easiest one because I was also there. There's 2 115 lines that come in from a right of way that goes from Holbrook to Weymouth. So it's on the Weymouth side. 2 115 lines come in, only designated to Hingham, and feed a good-sized substation that only feeds Hingham. That's where it gets tricky. So the question would become, if you end up being you'd still be a customer of grids, believe it or not, off of those lines. And I'll give you a couple of examples. Georgetown, Hull are customers of grid fed by 2 lines. Georgetown's been out 4 days with nothing that they can do about it because it was the grid lines. And what grid considers Hull and Georgetown is one customer. Because to them, you're one customer. You're a large load, but you're one customer. So you're kind of at the rear end, I'll say, to say it nicely, of the restoration plan. So that, you may have it a little bit simpler because you have the 2 lines, but you've got the 2 stations, and so how does that asset, get valued? How do you continue to take service from them? And where is the point of demarcation where a Cohasset municipal light plant, let's just call it, where does that take its feed from? And how does that work? The other thing is there must be a potential tie somewhere else. Because, a lot of times they'll feed through. A system will always feed through somewhere, right? So you have backup. You will lose that backup. You'll have to do work inside the town. But then now we're getting very technical on it, but those are a lot of the things you really have to think about. I did this same discussion 6-7 years ago, the town of Plymouth, same thing. They're even bigger than you guys from a footprint. If you look at it, it goes all the way over to Route 25, right? From Route 3, in theory, Plymouth goes all the way that far, and they're fed from multiple stations or multiple lines. And I'm talking about a dozen. So that became something that just became untenable, but it was the same kind of question. What can we do? The rates are high, right? We haven't even talked about the fact that municipal rates still to today are 25 to 30% cheaper. And that's across the board on average. Hingham is somewhere still around 14.5 cents. I have a house on the Cape that's 25 cents and one in Rockland that's 24 cents. And those are the 2 other utilities. That's a significant difference. And then as you discussed before, the service levels are significantly different. As unfortunately, you folks experienced, a couple of weeks ago, where most of the light plants were all back on. Hingham had some real tree damage, and I certainly know why. So they took a little bit longer, but if you looked at most utilities, municipal utilities that were in the same corridor, they were all back. So that becomes an issue too. And that's where people start to get frustrated over some of these things. And why can't we be like that? Or why can't we do this? So, wanting to explore what you're talking about is probably the best time. The only other question I would have, and it sounds like you guys have looked into it, I'd be curious to see if you were to put some type of, and I'll call it generation, could be whatever it might be, as you were discussing, whether it's battery storage or something else. You can do that and feed inside the town. You can't export it because you can't be an exporter. You can't be a generator inside, I don't believe, a national grid territory without joining, the kind of the ISO, kind of joining the markets. And I'll warn you now that if you want to go down that path, I have the perfect guy to talk to. You have a senior regulatory VP who is actually the chair of NEPOOL and sits on the ISO board representing public power, because there is some downside to that. It's not all upside. If you end up being kind of a market-based generator, there are penalties if you don't show up, if you want to go that route. If you put everything behind the meter, that's a different story. But then you're not necessarily feeding the town. So there's a lot of, there's a lot of those considerations to be taken.
So we'll talk about that in a moment, but Pat, you've had your hand up patiently for a while. Do you have a question?
Yeah, so I just wondered, John, is there any, I don't understand all the technical aspects of this, but would there be any benefit for towns to join together? So we have Marshfield and Situate, for example, that are kind of in the same boat that we are. If we were to try to join up and become either, one municipal light or however you would set that up. I'm not sure how that would work, but because our lines come through Situate, that might address some of that problem. But I'm not sure if you would have more traction, trying to bring 3 towns to the table. There's a lot more headaches, of course, but what do you think about that?
Yeah, and that was the discussion with Foxborough, Rentham, and Plainville that I had after a pretty bad snowstorm in 2011. Those 3 town managers came in because my office is in Foxborough. Now it's in Mansfield, but it's right on the town line. And those 3 gentlemen had kind of the same thought where you were going, Pat, which is, because they were also contiguous. See, and that's the other thing. If you're contiguous, you got a little bit better chance, but it complicates all the technical stuff we were bringing up to a level that is, nothing can never work. Something can always work, right? Us as engineers, and Steve can shake his head, we can always make something work. It's just, it can get overly costly. The other thing is, most of the light plants that have multiple towns, I'll give you the best example is probably Reading. Reading, it feeds North Reading, Linfield, and Wilmington. Okay. Reading bought those facilities back in 1870, whatever it was, each of the towns, right? So, and they're all contiguous. Here's where it gets politically tough. And this is a kind of Gene and Kerry and the rest of you situation. Reading is the one that controls everything because the light board sits in Reading because they paid for it. Wilmington is the 60% of the revenue comes from Wilmington. So they had to create an advisory board, a citizens advisory board, in order to handle Wilmington, Linfield. And this goes back 100+ years. And there are 20-year agreements between the towns in order to do this, because you can't all of a sudden say, I'm taking my ball and going home. It doesn't work that way when you have contractual agreements for power, or you've signed into energy deals, or you've built out the system. So while Pat's thought is a good one, it does get ultra complicated when you try to involve other cities and towns. And in this particular case, I could very easily see the town of Marshfield wanting to be the big player in this. You know what I mean? I really could. And again, that doesn't necessarily just address your concerns in Cohasset.
Right. And Marshfield, I think, is either a municipal light company or serviced by Eversource.
No, they're an Eversource customer.
They're Eversource. Okay. So the rest of us, Situate, Norwell, and Cohasset, are National Grid. I don't know if that makes a difference, but it is a distinction.
It only makes a difference in the negotiations, right? You're dealing with one company instead of 2 that you're going to fight with anyway. But you really don't want to bring a second company in. I will tell you, and I was there. I know some of the people that are still there. This will not go down easy. If anybody really truly wanted to do this, and they're good at what they do, they lobby well, they have the DPU. They spend a lot more time up there. The municipal light plants are not regulated by the DPU. They're regulated by a board. So for example, in Hingham, where Steve is and where I was, there's a 3-person elected board. In most places, it's either a 3-person board or a 5-person board. 80% are elected and 20% are probably appointed, because there's different types of town government. In some places there's a town manager, in some places there's a mayor, those type of things. So that's where the residents, who are also the customers, not all the same all the time though, right? If you have commercial folks in your town, they're customers of the light plant, but they're not necessarily residents who get to vote on this. Example being Derby Street or the industrial park, so that creates another problem potentially. But again, these established light plants, that's just the way it is. Let me see what else I had on here. I just don't want to miss anything. Like I said, there's been legislative actions on this with very limited success, if any. I will send you guys, when I send you the presentation, I will send you the current bill. It's the same wording as the one from literally 2004 that Patrick Murr started Lexington was having real problems with Edison. They had a station in the middle of town that literally was blowing up. which is not necessarily a good thing. Knock on wood, that was after my time. But that caused a stir, and they tried to get folks to come together on the municipal side, kind of the municipal government side in that same area up there to try to municipalize, and it just didn't go anywhere. So a couple of the things I would suggest that we look at, and then I want to, answer any questions, is and bullet one that I had on my kind of next steps, you guys already did, because you have Gene and Kerry already here, which is helpful, is understanding what the process is and what kind of the challenges are. Making sure the town manager, the select board, and all those folks know it. And you guys have clearly done that already. And if not, I'm sure they've heard some of it tonight. I would suggest we could meet, or a subset could meet if you wanted, because I have a terrific relationship with her, with Joan Machino, who represents Hingham and Hull. Joan is a big proponent of light plants. Not that she could flip a switch and all of a sudden make Cohasset one, and I know she doesn't represent you guys necessarily.
No, I think she does.
Yeah,
And we
all
have
of
two, yeah, Joan Machino does represent us, and we have
Perfect.
two select people with their hands up. So finish your
Good.
thought on that, and then we'll let Corey and then Jean, and you're gonna get pushback, because we were hoping you're gonna come and tell us, oh yeah, it's easy, no problem. You just create a company, you put in your assets, and you go.
No.
Okay.
I wish it was that easy. And someone said to me today, why don't you just start with the fact that it's overly difficult to do and then go from there? And I said, that's not really the way you want to have this conversation. But if it's Joan, that's good, because she can certainly talk about that. The other reason for us to have a conversation with her is she's also on the TUE, the Telecommunications, Utilities, and Energy Committee. She sits on that committee, which is the committee that things like this would be brought to. Tom Golden was the chair. I got some legislation passed actually last session with his help. He actually sponsored something, which is very unusual for a chairman to sponsor. But Jeff Roy, who's the current House chair for Medway, and Mike Barrett, who's the Senate chair. Mike Barrett has Lexington and Concord is a municipal light plant. But I think a conversation with Joan around some of these discussions, I think, would be helpful, because she's going to bring a different context, because it is ultra different at the State House. It just is. When you get there and you start talking about these things, it's very
Right.
different.
So I'm about to punch a question into the chat room, and I just want to be careful of open meeting laws, because we do have a majority of the select board here. So we should think about what would be the right venue for Joan to have this discussion: public meeting, alternative energy committee, or select board. But before we go into that, Corey and then Jean, two of our select board members.
Right. Thanks, John, and thanks for being here. And so far, this has already been very informative. One thing that caught my eye, my company's in the South Shore Industrial Park. We're served by Hingham, so I was already aware of the better rate structure for Hingham, and the fact that you said that municipal, this is system wide, and that's the 25-30% gap. That's a significant gap. And if we're looking at this total project cost, it's one of the things we'll factor in is, okay, well, if we're saving our residents X amount of money, but the question I have is, outside of like corporate greed, how do you account for that difference? Is there something is it union workers, or is it just more efficient work, or is it lack of investment? Kind of, have you broken that down to kind of explain? That's a big gap where that comes from.
It's excellent. It's a nice way to tee things up, Corey. So thank you to a certain degree. The return that the IOU utilities are allowed is 12%. So they have that automatically. They're very close to it every year. They have shareholders that they have to answer to. The municipal, the municipal light plants shareholders are the people on this call. If you were a municipal, it's the residents of the town that are the shareholders. The other difference is, and the IOUs want to tell you they pay all kinds of taxes and they do all this. Most of the light plants pay more in a pilot payment, in a payment in lieu of tax payment, than they would if they were taxed on facilities in the town. And I give you an example. In Hingham, we have an agreement with the selectmen to pay them, I forget what the exact number was. And I probably shouldn't say, because what's that?
2 cents.
Yeah,
Total
it's 2
kilowatt
cents,
hour.
it's 2 cents per kilowatt hour. So it's really based on true business, right? If your load grows, you pay the town more. If you don't, or if it goes down, then it's a little bit different. But we were able to get the selectmen to understand that It's not a finite number and it doesn't exist, every year. The difference is that if we added up all the facilities in town and paid the tax rate, let's just say if we were an Eversource or we were a National Grid, it was probably in the $110,000 range or so. So they'll tell you that that's the difference, is that we don't have to pay taxes, we're nonprofit, all that. I had 10 linemen in Hingham for one town. When I was running the Cape division years back, I had 100 linemen for the Cape and the Vineyard. They have 40 now down there. So it's not a matter of numbers of people or the union, as you're saying, because the union workers, like line workers, get paid roughly the same. Otherwise they'd flee, you know what I mean? They'd leave a municipal, go over to, it's the same work. I think the significant difference is in efficiency. I think it's in keeping the system up. I think it's very different to have one or two or three towns, let's just say in the example of a Reading or a Taunton or those people that have multiple towns, than it is to try to serve 11 towns on the South Shore. That's the case. The other thing is there is a significant difference to me in admin costs. Big overheads, right, in the IOUs. Take a look at Westwood if you drive down 95, where Eversource's headquarters are. It's a big building with a lot of people that make a lot of money. Steve's got a building that has, I don't know, what do we have now? 20 people, 25 people?
28.
28 people, but they're all doing something and the overhead isn't as high. So those are all the differences, Corey, that make up, that gap. And that gap is an average. So there are some towns, I'll give you an example. Princeton got into some trouble with some on-site wind stuff. So their rates are a little bit higher. Concord has a different methodology. They want more renewables and more RECs. So they have a couple cents on there extra. But if you look at
that choice,
if you look at the straight rate, typical residential rate, those are the numbers. And I'll tell you, in Hingham, everything was fairly new. We'd upgrade things, every so many years. We tree trimmed every year. I assume they're still doing that, Steve, right? With a crew?
Of course.
Yep. So and I don't want to say it's better management because that's not really fair, but it's more in tune to there's two things. Let me put it to you this way. A municipal utility starts with two goals, period, all the time, every year. Keep the rates stable and keep the lights on, period. The third thing, like when I got to Hingham in 2004, right? The third thing on the list was whatever either the board, the community, or what was going on at that time that became your next goal or your next mission or your next issue to tackle. But those two things are core, period. And really, to be honest with you, it's the lights stay on is number one, because the rates are fairly reasonable, but that's what the residents want. If we were ever to do polls in Hingham or any of the other towns that we help, keeping the lights on would be number one, because the rates are where they are already. And even if they tweaked slightly, that wouldn't bother people. I had an attorney used to come in every month to pay his bill. I don't know why, but he did. And he'd always ask if I was in, could I come up and just say hi to him? So I'd go up, and the nice guy talking to him, I'd say, what gives with the whole thing? He says, I'm just astounded that I'm writing you a check for 1,000 kilowatt hours at about $140. And I just paid my cell phone bill and my cable bill, and they're a lot more than that. So there is an inherent, I understand why you guys would want to do this. Believe me, when I moved over from IOU to where I was, and now I've been doing, I was there for 8 years. I've been doing this now for 11 years. The municipal systems have a lot of potential benefits to it. Unfortunately, like I said before, most of them started, turn of the century or earlier.
So we're going to turn to Jean, and then, but I just do want to say, you're absolutely right. So the whole taxes, National Grid does pay property taxes on the equivalent of $460,000 worth of property in town. This was part of our analysis for whatever, that's where it is. But Jean, you had your hand up for a while. Do you have a question?
So two quick questions, just so I understand the municipalization process. Is this analogous to what Hingham did with Aquarian, where Aquarian fights, they said, this is the real worth. We say, no, this is the worth. We go to the regulator maybe, makes an assessment. Neither likes it. And then we go to the court and the court makes the determination. And then we decide where to go from there. Strikes me as a very similar process, including, having to deal with lobbyists, et cetera, in the political space too. But is that your sense? Am I correct in my assessment?
The water thing was an example of how it could be done. And like I say, no one's taken it that far because the IOUs have always held on to the franchise territory. So as of July 1st, 1998, whatever you served that day, and don't ask me why they picked that day, it's a day during the Restructuring Act, right? Whatever you served that day, you get to serve going forward. And now we're in 2021, almost 2022. I don't know if that has a bearing on it. You're right. Nobody likes it. Either side's not going to like it if you have to go to a regulator. I would have to ask, and I have somebody who used to be a DPU attorney. I could probably ask Rob if that works the same way for the electric. The other side of it is, so that worked out the way that if you look up Grafton, I think it is, there was a water issue in Grafton way back when where they wanted to buy it from a private company, and the judge went even higher. So the two people came up with their number, and the judge came up with a number higher that then they had to pay. So that's the risk of something like this. That's why a negotiated settlement obviously is the best. But like I say, I'm not sure you have a side that wants to sit down with you at the table, and that's where I think a discussion with Joan at a high level, because I don't want to put her in a bind either. I mean, I don't think she has a problem speaking, about these topics and all that. I don't know that I'd want to ask her, well, what would happen in this particular case? You know what I mean? It's hard for her to say.
Yeah, I would be surprised if she could say.
Well, she wouldn't. I don't think she would. I think she'd tell us that that's somewhere I can't go. She's that kind of lady, and she's very good, very open about things. And if she can't talk about it, or if it's going to put her in a bind, I think she'd tell us right away, which would be fine. But I do like listening to her thoughts around something like this. She had a bill trying to get the municipal systems kind of into the same carbon reduction, the whole net zero by 2050, 50% by 2030, all that kind of stuff. She had filed a separate bill before I was able to get the one with the Chairman Golden, which was kind of the same. And we spent she gave me 4 hours in her office to explain to her why going the direction I wanted to go and the way we crafted it would be better than hers, because hers was going to look more like a stick as opposed to the way we wrote ours and had the chairman do it. And I give her a lot of credit. As soon as we got it in there and the chairman blessed it, she acquiesced and kind of dropped hers because it got to the same place, at the end of the day. So I have a lot of respect for her. And that's why I think she will give us time for one. And I think she'll give us some feedback, let's put it that way, on some of these things. Go ahead, Jean.
And I apologize. That is helpful information. I mean, this is all super helpful information. And you might be turning to this, and maybe Tanya, you might be wanting to move in this direction, but is there a way to do a partial purchase? Like, for example, some of the assets, if we were to do, let's say, the Bric grant and carve out, portions of lines and wires, is that something within the realm of possibility if we're going to invest a lot of money in a certain square, for example?
So that's a great question, Jean. And I was just about to phrase a question, John, for you. We are looking to submit, we don't know if we'll pass the first step, to be honest, but we have worked very closely with National Grid, who has told us they're not going to, they put it this way, it will be a fight if we want to buy their distribution assets. However, they have worked very closely with us and very collaboratively and provided amazing support on an effort that we have undertaken to look at a microgrid solution for some of our poor power supply issues. They've worked very collaboratively with us. And they are not allowed to own generation. And the microgrid design includes both generation, rotating generators, and batteries and solar. So if the town were to pursue something like that and own the generation, if portions of the microgrid on the distribution system upgrades were owned by the town, because we got grant funding, we paid for that separate microgrid. So obviously National Grid didn't own it. They don't own it. They didn't pay for it. They can't recover rates on that. And they have been open to that structure. Could we create a municipal light company for purposes of owning, just say, the generation assets and the battery assets? Would that be a way to use a municipal light company structure? And then we obviously pay for the distribution services from National Grid. And have an operating agreement with them for that portion of the microgrid when the lights go out.
Well, my first initial thought when you say they're very helpful, they gave you the discussion I figured you would get on the asset buying. I figured that was going to be the first answer. That's always their first foray. Here's my slightly cynical side. The reason why they're glad to have you look at and do a microgrid, because you're benefiting them, right? In theory, if you're keeping a portion, even a portion of Cohasset up, you're doing them a favor, because they get fined for outages lasting longer than a period of time that aren't more than 15% of their system, so on and so forth, right? So if someone else is willing to do, is to put in assets that don't interfere with their system or their ability to, or you're not cutting into their revenue, because all you're really doing with a microgrid is arguably keeping it up when the possibility of no electricity is flowing, right? Because if you were to run a microgrid simultaneously, it would be more expensive for you. Those rotating machines are not going to be cheap, because what are you going to feed them with? Then the argument becomes, and I don't know how Cohasset feels, because I have almost 30 clients in the municipal sector, and 20 plus of them, if I mention the word rotating machines, served by, say, natural gas, they might have kicked me off this call by now. There are just certain communities that's not going to happen. But you also have to be rational and realize, and Mike, who's not on, and he's going to hear about that, but they're talking about bringing a couple of rotating machines back in Hull for the winter. Because
so I just have to tell you, that's why he's not on. So he's at Hull right now talking about getting an oil-based peaker. And that's also why we don't have one of our alternative energy committee members on, because he's against it and Mike is for it. And so we have two members of our committee who are sitting on opposite sides of the table.
No,
that's
and again,
this industry.
No, it is. But again, looking at why you want to do it is the issue. And that I try to say that to everybody. We haven't done we haven't done a fossil fuel deal for any of our customers since 2013. Everything has been solar, wind, some nuke, hydro, and we just did a big offshore wind thing. The first time municipal systems have been in the offshore stuff. And we were able to pull that off. Still don't ask me how, because it was a long weekend of trying to do that. The state has not allowed the municipal systems to be in the offshore procurement, but we were able to pull it off for a piece anyway. But if you're thinking of creating this microgrid version or a resiliency plan that includes those kind of things, that is a different discussion than, we want to be, non-emitting and we want to do this. When the lights are out, the lights are out. And people will not be real pleased with that if there are other opportunities, right? But I'd be curious to see. My guess is they're playing ball on that because it doesn't really affect them. The only thing you got to be careful of is, and I don't know, you were just describing what you thought it might look like. Are you thinking that Cohasset would own lines off of these generation assets? So there'd be
Well,
a second set of lines in town?
No, it'd be an overlay on top of the existing system, but let's just keep it simple.
Yeah.
And stay away from distribution. Another thing we looked at for the same cost or similar cost, we could go to Tesla and say, okay, give us a bulk deal and we will offer to the town batteries in every home.
Mhm.
Right. But maybe bring in our low cost of capital or through an enterprise fund, create a municipal light company. There's different structures we could take. So in a simple way, could we create a municipal light plant just to own generation?
In the statute, it talks about just, generation, distributing energy, all of those things, up to nat gas, because there's a couple of muni systems that have natural gas systems as well. There's 4 of them actually in the state. So the statute allows that. And if you could, my guess would be, if we could write something, right, that is narrowly focused and try to go to create a light plant, but it's very narrowly focused to the things you're talking about, then there's less pushback, because you may as well have an agreement with Grid, let's just say, for argument's sake. The other behemoth is not going to go for it. I can tell you that for sure. Because what it does is they'll think it opens up the door. So if we could somehow come up with, and that's why nobody fights the ones in Western Mass, because even though they're called municipal light plants, if you look at how it's written, it's all telecom. Has nothing to do with electricity, natural gas, or any other type of energy source. Otherwise, those wouldn't happen either. They'd have to come up with a different way to do it, probably through a co-op, or something like that. You can create go ahead.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing you say, and then I'm going to give you some last words because I'm not seeing any hands up, and we're at 8:30, and this has been so awesome. What I'm hearing you say is, if we were to say create a light plant solely for the purposes of owning generation assets or batteries or other distributed energy resources that would service the town, set aside how that energy got delivered during an outage, just set that aside for now.
Yep.
And maybe we have an agreement with National Grid, but we're not threatening to buy their system or their future revenue source.
And that's what the agreement would have to probably come down to, is all of those things that you just mentioned, where they're kept whole, where you're not infringing on their franchise rights and all that, probably have to get written into whatever light plant legislation.
But we don't need legislation. We have the ability to do this. We could become a light plant.
You need 2/3 vote twice. Separated by, I forget what it is, 150 days or 90 days. There's some time frame that you have to do at the town level. Then, the other thing you mentioned, just real quick, because it's on the top of my head before I forget. Grid can own batteries. NSTAR owns batteries in P-Town. So and when we had the ACES grants that went through, we got about $5 million for our folks. So Reading put one in, Braintree has one, Taunton has one, Ashburnham has one, and there's one more. Oh, Wakefield has one. And we got money, to offset some of those costs, but they could own them. The real question is, they want to be in very large, right? Everything needs to be utility scale for them. And that's not what you're necessarily talking about. You're talking about something smaller. But I could see us trying to carve something like that in there. And the fact that you've got them, at least at the table, it's too bad we weren't having this conversation a year ago before their government affairs guy left, Joe Newman. Joe Newman was terrific and is a friend. We would have got, and he was pretty straight. So if we were going down a particular path that wasn't going to fly, he would tell us right away, instead of us getting, kind of too far down the line and lambasted. But these utilities are going to have to acquiesce to some of this stuff, because they're just going to keep getting pounded by this. They are. I mean, look at what happened the other day. And it's not that they didn't bring crews in. They brought plenty of people in, or they thought they did. But no one goes home today. And maybe I'm old enough to know. When I flicked the switch when I was a kid, there was no guarantee the lights were going to come on. In the late 70s, early 80s. Today, does anybody go home and flick a light switch or try to turn any appliance on or plug in your phone or your iPad or anything else and think the lights aren't going to come on? So it's got,
Sadly, in this town, in the middle of the storm, yes, it's
yeah, no, in the middle
surprising
of the
if the
storm,
lights
yes,
do
but
go on.
yeah, but on a regular day, you know, and all that. So it's become a more of a necessity than just a commodity or something nice to have. I mean,
Yeah.
my mother still jokes about having candles around and all that. And she lives in Brookline, so they haven't lost power in I don't know how the hell long, you know, but it's those type of things. But I think we could do something, but it'd have to be very specific because I just think that they're gonna balk at some of the other stuff. Virginia Jensen just sent something kind of funny that I do want to read. So we were talking about the power going out and all that, and then I mentioned how they created the telecom things out west, and she put no telecom without electricity, and she's not wrong. And that's a for sure. But it's because it was non-threatening that those quasi, because all of a sudden, you know, I get a feed from the State House every day and so on, and all these bills are coming through and all these things are getting created. And I'm saying, who's creating municipal light plants, until we dug into it and found out it was kind of that purely telecom thing. But maybe we do it under the guise of something like that, where it's specific to Cohasset, it's specific to assets. Like I say, we got a better chance at that. And I'll tell you, that's another thing that maybe I would have teed up when we talk to Joan.
Yeah. Okay,
You know?
John, this has been so great. I encourage everybody to thumbs up, reaction, clap. This
Listen,
has been,
but
thank you
I want-
so much.
Oh, absolutely. And I want to say, I apologize. You will have the presentation. Tanya will send it out to everybody, so you'll have that. If there's anything else, I mean, I love talking about this stuff. I really do. This is what I do all day long. You know, I came over from the IOU side and can see that the municipal light plants are like the energy industry when I started. You know, everybody knew where everybody was. I never thought I'd figure out anything because all my linemen used to take service calls by whose house it was near. Oh yeah, that outage is over by so-and-so's house. You know, it's that kind of thing. It was a family type thing. And that's what a lot of munis are still like. And the fact that you guys are interested, you guys have a purpose, you know, kind of a direction you might want to go. You know, Tanya, if you want, you can reach out to me anytime. I don't mind coming on if there's a couple of questions, or if anybody sees anything, you know, from tonight or the presentation or anything. Tanya has my info. You can just send it to me. It's not a problem to answer, not at all.
John, we very well might be asking you back within the next 6 months. So as we develop this thought process more, I think technology has put the camel's nose under the
Yep.
tent, combined with the restructuring legislation from 20 years ago. So I think it is an opportunity for Cohasset to take the lead in trying to figure out how to improve our energy supply. We can't do it without National Grid. I mean, that right now we can't. And if we were to try to do it without National Grid, what I'm taking away from your discussion is it would be very costly and it would take a lot of time. Doesn't mean it's not something to think about and consider and continue looking at. And we at the Alternative Energy Committee are tasked with doing that. But I will tell you, in a way, I'm glad the slides couldn't be brought up. This has been a great conversation. You've been amazing. And I want to thank you again for your
And
time.
I'll be honest with you, I would much rather do a conversation. I did the slides only because there's a few things on there that people can take away, and what that bill number is. And there's a few other things in there that you guys can take a look at. I would leave you with, to what you just tried to close with, if the Alternative Energy Committee and the select folks that are on here, if you come up with, what are we really trying to do? Or what are we trying to accomplish here? And because other folks have come the other way and said, hey, you know what? We want to be a muni and that's it. Kind of that's goal one. And if we don't get that, we're done. That kind of thing. You can't do that. So if you approach it with, where do we really want to go? What would be a satisfactory end to our, you know, our either going with grid, without, what's the best for the town? If you can come up with those type of things, then you work your way into what the solution is going to be. Because you're right. If you went ahead and you sent a letter in, or the selectmen sent a letter in to grid saying, we want to sit down and talk about the assets and all this, you'll be lucky to talk to them sometime next year. You know, there's so much going on. They've got a lot of things going. So I think understanding where you guys are going and then maybe the opportunities that you see, maybe a better way to go at this. And it's the first community I've heard. And again, you're right. Technology is making a lot of this happen, right? If you look up Green Mountain Power up in Vermont, the utility, which is actually an IOU, has power walls in everybody's home up there in certain communities. And they use those when the lights go out, or they use those to backfeed, similar to what we're talking about with a bunch of our folks, EV charging, right? You could use an EV at night as a battery if you had enough of them. State doesn't have enough of them yet to make that a reality, but there are all kinds of things we cannot make. I'm gonna say this, and this is bad because I know it's being recorded. This state cannot make its 2050 goal today. There is no way. The technology doesn't exist. There's not enough resources, and we just potentially lost 1,200 megawatts coming from Maine. So that sets us back. So technology and other things are going to have to answer the call over the next 20 or 30 years. And it's the same thing you're talking about, just on a much smaller level.
All right, this has been so great. Thank you again. I'm sure we will be in conversation with you and call you back. But John, you've been as amazing as Mike Schmidt said you would be.
Okay, thank you.
So don't
I
feel bad
appreciate
that
the
he's not
time.
here.
Thank you, John.
Thank you,
John.
guys. Stevie, I'll talk to you, Steve, all right?
Definitely. And the whole alignment thing hasn't changed.
No, I'm sure it hasn't. And
It
it
hasn't.
shouldn't. Why should it? The rate's the same.
Exactly.
I love it. I love it. And to
thank
the
you, folks.
Jensens who have been contributing, thank you very much also for your participation, and to the select board. As always, it's just a pleasure to have you. It's just such a pleasure to have so much support in this town to solve this problem, because it is a real problem. You're absolutely right. Okay, John,
All right, thank you.
I actually am going to send you, as a prize for coming to speak with us, I'm
Oh,
going to
geez.
send you the presentation we gave to the select board on Tuesday, which talks about our microgrid plan and the Bric grant that we are trying to go after. I think you will find, as an engineer, you'll find it intriguing and interesting, and that may entice you to come back even more. So
Well, no,
happy to chat with you on that.
No, great. And it'd be good to take a look at it. And, I neglected to mention, we helped Hingham with an RFP, and they have a battery now that we operate. We also operate one in Braintree, Reading, and down in Rhode Island. We have a customer in Rhode Island. So we're very familiar with those kind of things. And those are more utility scale batteries. So the approach you're taking is a good one, but I'd want to hear you answer that question of what do we want at the end of this? Because I think then you know what direction you really want to go. So I'll leave you with that. I'm going to go watch the
Okay.
Pats game. So
Go Pats. All right.
go Pats. But when you need something, just let me know.
Okay, appreciate it.
Okay?
Thanks, John.
All right. See you guys.
All right,
Hey, John.
great.
See you, Steve.
Thank you. Okay, awesome stuff. We are now on to an update with respect to the rest of the initiatives that we have underway. The first is an update on the Bric grant. Based on a pre-recorded question that came up from Fran, I want to answer what that is. The Bric grant, and we presented in more detail to the select board. The select board gave us permission to pursue a Bric grant. Bric stands for the Buildings Resiliency and Infrastructure and Communities grant. It is part of the FEMA, which is at the federal level, Federal Emergency Management Agency. And they offer a 75% funding opportunity. The town would have to figure a way to come up with the other 25%. It could be town money, it could be grants from the state, it could be any non-federal sources of money. But this looked to us to be a potentially intriguing way to pursue an opportunity to work with National Grid to identify how could we improve power supply within the town and obtain 75% federal money to be able to do that. And that 75% of the federal money could go towards solar energy arrays, batteries, rotating generators, which we can call them backup generators. That's similar to what the town already has at the water plant and the wastewater treatment plant. So the process itself has been fruitful already. National Grid has worked with us, has been very collaborative. We have developed a microgrid plan. I will include in the minutes for today what was presented to the select board on Tuesday with respect to our proposed mini grid, as we're calling it. It is phase 3 of the microgrid framework that this committee approved in May of 2020. But that proposed mini grid that we have developed with National Grid and have submitted for MEMA to review, which is the next step in the Bric grant, that includes a distribution system overlay on a 6-mile rectangle, including part of Pond Street, Sawyer Street, and the bits of Elm Street and Pleasant Street to connect them on the harbor side, and 3A to connect them on the other side. That would be a backbone of a separate distribution system that could operate when the town has an outage. And it would be powered by resources in town that would be able to provide electricity that could then be delivered to load. The net impact National Grid calculated would be a 90% improvement in power supply, a 90% reduction in outages for anybody who is connected to the grid, to the backbone. That includes a number of houses, a number of commercial establishments, such as 4 gas stations, plus the Stop and Shop area. And it includes 80% of the town's critical infrastructure. 80% of the town's critical facilities that were identified as part of a previous FEMA hazard mitigation plan. So that is what the Alternative Energy Committee has been looking at. There was a presentation that's been done. It's now under the guise of the town manager, who is responsible for pursuing the Bric grant. The Alternative Energy Committee has been providing technical support with to the town manager's office to be able to work with National Grid to design a plan around this. It was presented at the select board. We will include it in the minutes for completeness, as this is now a public document. And on Monday, thanks to Brianna, who has been amazing in taking the lead on this as well, we submitted the benefit cost analysis. And as part of that, there was a lengthy description of what the project would look like, what the assets would be, what the cost of those assets would be, and what the benefits under a federal FEMA construct would look like. So that's this update on the Bric grant. And Brianna, do you want to give any additional update on that?
No, we're on track with all of the deadlines, and I don't believe you said this. Our next deadline we're approaching is December 6th. So by the time the AEC meets next, hopefully we'll be saying we've submitted to the state and we're in the process of waiting to hear back whether we're in the final submission for FEMA. So the state is going to be submitting our application to FEMA. So we're wrapping it up in the next couple of weeks. So that'll be the next update, will be whether or not we made it past that step. So far we've made it past the statement of interest, and we've made it past the benefit cost analysis, and we're waiting on feedback. And the town is starting to get aggressive about the grant rating and making sure that we get that done.
Excellent. Any questions on the Bric grant? And Fran Collins, does that answer your question about what Bric is and why we're pursuing it?
I don't believe Fran is on the call anymore. I think.
Oh, you're right. He is not. So anyway, hopefully you got the prior explanation. Jean, you have your hand up.
I just wanted to thank everyone. I know that you guys have done such a huge amount of work in a short amount of time. And it's been such great, in-depth, detailed work. And I know I ask hard questions about it, but that's only because I care. And, you know, like all of us want to figure out what the right approach is. And it's not totally, I'm learning and it's not totally clear to me. So don't take it as anything other than that. But I really do appreciate all the hard work that this entire committee has done to turn around that Bric grant so quickly, which was just incredible, including with all the numbers. And I think even if National Grid is helping us, and being collaborative. I think it's a good thing too, that they realize that you are so focused and really pushing them to a place that it sounds like a lot of communities haven't pushed them in terms of really wanting to explore all of these options, which I think is fabulous. So thank you for that. And I suppose the only question I had, which I didn't really even think about until John's presentation, was, do we somehow change who we are in terms of becoming some sort of regulated utility or something with the wires and distribution? I have no idea, but I saw him sort of begin to open that door and I just wasn't sure. So anyway, I just don't know. I'm ignorant in that, but I did see him start to think about that. And so maybe that's something that we just want to think about as we proceed in terms of, I'm totally open to all these creative solutions and pressing things legally. Just because it hasn't been done before doesn't mean it shouldn't. So anyway, I just want to throw that out there.
Great. Well, thank you. And Jean, I will always say on the hard questions, bring them on. Because if we don't need the answer, if we don't have the answer, we need to. And to just quickly say, yes, there is a difference between regulated distribution wires and competitive generation. And National Grid is not allowed under statute. They're not allowed to own generation. They are not. Whereas we can. If we were to own wires, we would suddenly be subject to another set of regulations. And it becomes a lot more complicated, but that's why the municipal light company structure exists, and we'd have to operate under that. And that also prohibits us from taking power from another light company or giving power to another light company. We can't produce within our borders and deliver outside of our borders. That's just part of the part of that. So I will say, so Virginia, you should be attending all of our meetings going forward. We're loving your questions. Jerusalem Road is one of the worst roads in town with respect to the number of outages that it experiences. And under the microgrid that we designed, part of Jerusalem Road is underground. That's the part that runs along the coast. And you can see very much the improvement of going underground. The problem is it's 6 to 8 times the cost of staying overhead. So to convert the entire town would be more than $100 million, very expensive. Jerusalem Road is part of the proposed mini grid. So it would receive at least a 50% reduction in outages. And to the extent that there can be better vegetation management pursued, we might be able to improve that even more. So Jerusalem Road, we have identified who the worst streets are, where the hotspots are. I think you will enjoy the presentation that we gave to the select board because we're able to really hone in on the problem. But yes, so generation is different than distribution wires, both from negotiating with National Grid because they cannot own generation. So they're not going to be able to stop us or fight us on that because they have no dog in that fight. But the distribution wires also would subject us to a different set of regs. Okay, and I do want to commend and thank again Brianna, who has been a partner in crime on this whole thing. I mean, she's been amazing. Meetings, you wouldn't believe the meetings we've had with so many different folks, especially with National Grid, and she's just amazing. Amazing. Okay, so that is the Bric grant. On to the next topic. I'm pulling up my agenda. Hold on.
I believe next is the sustainability and net zero goals.
Yeah, see, this is what I'm saying. She's totally my wing woman here. So the sustainability and net zero goals. We have a presentation on this from Pat Gooding. Pat has been talking about sustainability and net zero goals, as you all know, for a couple of months now. And she has some very pointed presentation slides to discuss. And we have not put anything on the agenda as to being for vote. However, I think that we are getting closer to getting to a point of vote, and the vote would be what we might want to pursue as a committee. And we don't have the authority to pursue anything on our own. So I would expect that following this presentation and discussion, we would be next meeting ready to take a vote on whether or not to recommend to the select board that we pursue sustainability net zero goals. But it may be that we have enough questions today that we can't take it to a vote next month, but we won't know until the end of this discussion. So Pat, I'm going to let you take the lead on this. And Brianna, if you could give her presentation sharing.
Yep. You should be all set, Pat.
How are we doing? You see it?
Yes.
Okay, great. So I'm going to try to make this quick to make up for some of the lost time. And actually, Tanya, I've been talking about this since February, so I'm going to talk really fast this time. So my goal with this discussion is just to bring this conversation up again. I'm a huge advocate for getting the conversation started in the town of Cohasset around net zero, climate action, anything that we can move towards that goal. You know, our neighbor communities have been working on this. Hingham passed this last year. So I think there's probably community support, and we need to get out there and socialize that in the community. So really today, I just wanted to review the fact that, and Tanya mentioned this to me, so credit back to Tanya. I said, you know, should we expand our charter and the Alternative Energy Committee to have it include, you know, looking at net zero policies, et cetera? And Tanya said, I think our charter already includes that. So I went back and pulled out some of the sections that I think are relevant to that. Looking at community-wide residential business energy efficient and clean energy options, and the bold I'm just reading, and other energy-based policies that benefit the town and its citizens. So I think planning for a net zero future, obviously benefit to everyone in the community. I think we have a role to play, to be determined what that role is. And as we saw, I think last month or the month before, MAPC, Mass Area Planning Council, has created a whole toolkit around this that allows communities to think about the various dimensions of undertaking something like this, which, you know, as I said before, some of our neighboring communities have already done, but a lot of communities in Massachusetts have undertaken. We heard from Concord, for example, and all the work that they've done there. I'd just like to see us start in this direction. Just to review, this is their framework for action that MAPC did a presentation to us on, saying that you really have to consider these 4 areas and work on them iteratively and in parallel. So where we fit into this, I think, is a discussion to be had. But I took a sort of a look at some of the things that we could do sort of independently of the greater community and the other committees in town that might have a role to play in this. Because let me back up a second. I want to say that I don't think the AEC needs to drive this or should drive this. I think that really where the power will be is if the select board decides to move forward with something like this, is looking at a cross-committee working group where we have input from conservation, you know, recreation, whatever the committees are that are focused in this area, and also obviously citizens of the town, and put together a group that can say, here's how we could approach a plan to get to net zero and some climate action. But I think MAPC's laid out a good sort of guideline here for us that you have to get support from the community, pursue that commitment with the town management, the select board. Look at holistic planning, so looking at where do you want to be in 2050 or whatever that target year is, and what are your sort of milestones along the way, and how do you want to address these things in what order, and how do you determine that? Well, you have to gather the data on your town. So Cohasset's situation in terms of level of greenhouse gases might be completely different than some of the other towns around us. For example, Hingham has a lot of commercial space. They have some industry that Cohasset doesn't have. So where their greenhouse gases are coming from, their sources may look a lot different than what Cohasset's do. So that's going to tell us the information to say, where are areas that we need to focus on? What are the techniques that we could use in order to address those? And the first stage that MAPCY sort of earmarked as the thing to do is to do that greenhouse gas survey. So one of the things I thought we could do as a committee, if we decide to move forward with this, is to focus on helping with that survey. So as I said, we're going to need a lot of people, a lot of collaboration and coordination across different dimensions of the town management and the citizens. But I think in the interim, we could raise our hands and say, here's an area where we could help, which is to go gather some information that then can inform the process down the road. And I know, Brianna, I'm going to put you on the spot and ask you to speak to this, because in my conversations that I've had offline with various folks, I've heard that a climate summit was being discussed for next year. So to bring together people to talk about how should we move forward. And I think, Brianna, you've been on some meetings today that you could probably enlighten us on. But I don't know, based upon that, if there are plans already in the town for beginning to work on this. But if there's not, I'd like to go to the select board and say, you know, let's get some funding from Mass CEC. I think we've been approved, and use that to try to get this survey done, and then link up with the other entities in town to, you know, when and if this climate summit happens, or however the select board deems is the best way to work on this, bring that to the table. But Brianna, could you speak to any of the new information that you might have on that subject?
Yes, absolutely. So for the town-wide initiatives, what's happening now is the town released a survey to all of the committees and departments, which we asked the committee chairs, and I know Tanya has responded for the Alternative Energy Committee, what has been done for climate mitigation and what the future plans are for that and ongoing plans. And then whether or not they'd be willing to participate in some sort of climate summit. So the town is trying to put together a framework now so that by spring of next year in 2022, you know, probably around Earth Day is the target. There's going to be some sort of community forum that's held where we gather all of the interested stakeholders in Cohasset to really have a serious conversation on climate change and the different topics that are of interest, and for the town to use that as an opportunity to explain to citizens, well, here's, you know, priorities, here's what we've done so far for climate mitigation, and to kind of really get that across to residents, and then to have this dialogue about what we're going to do in the future. And so I had a conversation earlier today because in advance of that, we are planning a harbor resiliency initiative. And so I was speaking with Lauren Lind and Chris Senior today, and I did bring up that there's this push for net zero goals to be established, and what can we do to kind of use this as a platform to enhance a climate plan and something like that? Because we're not sure at this stage what concrete things are going to come out of that climate summit. And so having net zero goals be discussed at it would be something that's concrete that's coming out of it. And, you know, maybe that's something that after this community climate discussion, we're forming a real plan based on community input that is then taken to a future town meeting. So it's a potential topic at the climate summit. It could be a potential goal for that summit as a whole. As I said, we're gathering survey responses right now, which are going to be put into a climate report. It'll be a climate status mitigation report that kind of compiles all of the committee and department responses, and then that'll be issued and publicly available to everyone in the town as just a informational packet, and that will guide our climate summit as well. So I hope that's a good explanation. I'll also say the greenhouse gas inventory, you're right, we do have funding from MAPC. For some reason, there's been no next steps with them on that. They just haven't reached out about it, and we haven't connected on what we're supposed to do now. I'm not sure. I don't think we've been sent the money either, but the funding was confirmed by the DPU. So yeah, I see Corey, you have your hand raised.
Yeah, Brent, I was just going to ask, who were you working with at MAPC about that? I know we had, we lost Betsy, and there's been multiple things that have kind of been, we're trying to light up all the things that are kind of waiting to hear back from. And it sounds like this is another thing to put on that pile. So if that's the case, let me know, or just send me an email. And if I can help with connecting, I'm trying to push a lot of logs uphill with them. So.
Okay, yeah, I've been reaching out to their clean energy team, Megan Aki and Jesse Way, I believe, and I haven't been able to get in touch with either of them on the greenhouse gas inventory or other initiatives. So I'm not sure if.
All right, I'll CC you on an email to our regional rep and include them too, and see if we can get some momentum.
That would be great, and Michelle Leary as well, please.
Yeah, can do, sure.
Thank you, Corey.
So that's the town's state right now with climate. There are discussions happening. That climate summit will be coming out in the springtime.
Okay, but as far as you know, there's no plan to start a working group to start creating goals or anything like that.
No, no plans.
Okay. Well, since we have two members of the select board on the call, is it fair, Corey and Jean, to say that then there isn't any discussion about creating such a working group at this point, or?
Basically, I mean, how the flow should be is if there's something that, I mean, the Alternative Energy Committee is, designed to advise the select board, bring to select board ideas. So Jean and I, we obviously can't speak for the select board. The select board hasn't discussed this. However, so if there's a package of proposal that you'd like us to do, obviously we'll have yourself or Tanya coordinate that to get you in front of the board, and the board can have a deliberation at that level. But it really starts from, I think what you're doing right now is perfect. It starts from you, and you can package up the idea and then bring it up, and then we can discuss about the next steps.
Yeah, absolutely. I just want to make sure I wasn't.
Yeah, Pat, to
in the
your,
middle of something else happening.
there's been nothing on the agenda that we've discussed that is akin to what you're talking about.
Okay, great. All right, so that's really all I had to put out there was, absent some other suggestion from the committee members in terms of a suggestion to the select board in terms of ways that we could, offer up a start on this effort, which I'd love to hear if other people have some other suggestions. This seemed like a concrete way that we could get some traction. That I'll open it up for everybody to discuss, and you can take the screen back, Brianna.
Thank you, Pat, and thank you for championing this topic. This is how things bubble up from our committee up to the select board, and then we end up getting good action. So Lydia, you have your hand up. Do you have a question?
A comment, I guess. Last night at our school committee meeting, we had the middle school student council present, and they've totally reorganized and have a number of subcommittees that are driven by student interest. And one of the students who spoke last night has essentially started a subcommittee for like climate change and alternative energy incentives in Cohasset. And he's like, I just am really concerned about climate, and I want to go beyond school. I feel like we can change the town. And I was like, I feel like I can connect you with some people. So I got his name and email address. So I'm wondering now, after seeing that, Pat, I could connect him with you and just share an email with Brianna and Tanya as well. I just feel like to have that student voice incorporated, and also be able to, expand perhaps the definition of the community you might want to involve, and have kids who are involved and then grow into voting adults who are involved as well.
That's great.
I got that email tonight, but he was super excited, and I, oh, sorry, my dog's sneezing in the background. And there's a group with him that are interested, so just exciting to have that kind of in our community.
So Lydia, as you know, we have been happy and wanting student reps. And in fact, my daughter is on the green team in high school. So I have asked her, we can draft a description of what the alternative, I'll just send the mission statement of what the Alternative Energy Committee does. See if we can get a member of the green team from the high school, and then this person from the middle school would be great. We would love to have student reps participating in this committee, and I think it would have repercussions and amazing consequences beyond.
Perfect. Yeah. So I will put the two teacher representatives who work with student council, and then John Mills, the middle school principal. I'll just add them just so that they're a part of the conversation, and you guys can make that connection.
Perfect. That's awesome. That's great. Any other questions for Pat? All right, so what I'd recommend, Pat, we have quarterly meetings with the select board. And at those quarterly meetings, we talk about what we're doing, what the status of our initiatives are, and new initiatives. This is how the Bric grant came up and got approval to move forward. If you could be prepared to offer up a recommendation of a path that our committee would take, I agree with you that our mission is squarely allowing us to do this. That path would then be able to be taken to the select board as part of our quarterly meeting, either in Q4, there's not much left, but Q4 2021 or Q1 2022. And we would present it as an initiative. I think at that point, the Bric grant will be behind us, so we will have bandwidth. We may know what some of the other initiatives are doing, but I think it would be a good initiative for 2022 as we move into the new year. But let's take it to vote at committee for our next meeting. We'll put that on the agenda, make sure it's clear that there's a vote. And depending on that vote, we would then bring it up to the select board to get permission to pursue in whatever way they think we should.
Great, thanks.
Okay, very good. Thank you again for championing this. And I will say, for the benefit of Josh, this is the way this committee works. And I will say proudly, I think this is partly why we get so much done, which is people have initiatives or ideas, and we encourage them to bring them to fruition. And so it's a great platform, and I think you're going to be a great addition on that. So let your imagination run wild,
All right.
as long as it's within the mission statement.
Got it. Thank you.
Okay, Mass CEC study grant. Do you want to report on that, Brianna, where we are, what we're thinking about, and what some of the follow-on opportunities have been from that?
Sure. So most recently, we have gotten an offer from Mass CEC to collaborate on a pilot project that a different community was originally a part of. The project is to get funding for 2 electric buses in town, 2 electric school buses, and due to third-party issues, the other community had to drop out, but Mass CEC was providing $200,000 for this, and then the community was going to seek extra funding, likely through the More EV program, which is another state program. And so there's a lot of funding going into this project that's already kind of set up and everything. And so we have an existing proposal that if we could get information about our fleet and send it over to NLX, I believe is the company doing this, then they'd be happy to send us 3 different options for pricing proposals, whether we want to do 3 years, 5 years, 7 years. We don't know what that would look like for cost yet, especially because our community is not an exact transfer over from the other community. So they would have to recalculate everything. But, you know, they had a conversation with Tanya and myself, and we sent that invite out to a lot of people. And so we were able to hear their view on it. And it's an exciting opportunity. I don't know what the economics will ultimately come out to be, but we're currently trying to fill out those surveys and get them back so we can see what the pricing comes out to.
Yes, and I will say thanks to Lydia, the Alternative Energy Committee has an agenda spot on December 1st, I believe, December 1st, to discuss the things that we're doing that touch on the schools, such as the Bric grant and the microgrid, as well as this opportunity for the electric school buses. Hopkinton was a town that had the opportunity to do the demonstration project with the highly subsidized electric school buses provided by NLX, so highly subsidized that the cost was on par with their diesel buses. They did have to drop out because their third-party supplier of electric buses and bus drivers could not make it work. It may be that the schools in Cohasset are in the same position. We are coming up on the end of the bus lease, and the town has had trouble finding bus drivers, is my understanding. And so the schools are looking for a simple solution with an outsourced set of parties for the renewal of the leases for the next 3-year term. We will present to the school committee. It's obviously their decision. Our job is to bring them opportunities, and this is an opportunity. I will note, though, in that presentation that there is a ton of money coming from the infrastructure bill at the federal government for electric school buses. So electrification of the school bus fleet around the country is a priority for this administration. And I think when timing on decisions are being made, that needs to be considered. And so we're just going to be informative, offer up this option. You know, frankly, from a strategic point of view, it could be very helpful to dip our toe into the water of electric buses for 2 of the 6 buses, do it for the next 3 to 5 years, use that money to set up charging stations, figure out if it works for us, doesn't work for us, and then based on that, make a decision as the infrastructure bill money comes down the pipe on whether that makes sense. Again, not our decision at the Alternative Energy Committee, squarely actually it straddles a couple of committees, school committee, capital planning, select board, but we are here to inform, to make sure timing is understood, and this is a great opportunity if the town is able to take it. Yes, Lydia.
I'm wondering if it would be possible, our packets are assembled, you know, like the Thursday before our meetings. I'm wondering if a presentation could be shared by that, like next week, so that committee members could preview the presentation and have time to process, because by the time we get to that agenda item, it's often late and patience is, you know, minimal, I would guess.
So the microgrid stuff can be
it's a little
presented
tricky.
for sure, because that's done. And then I think, Brianna, how quickly can we get the data from the schools on the school bus fleet to then be able to send to NLX and have some specifics?
So I believe Michelle reached out to Susan Owens. Lydia, if you happen to speak with her, if we can get that data on the fleet, as soon as we get that back, we can submit those surveys. I believe she has copies of, we've received 2 surveys now. We also received a survey from MAPC, who's looking to see if we're interested in electric buses, probably because they have funding for that as well. So we have 2 surveys that are interested in our fleet information. So if the sooner we get that back, the sooner we can submit
Yeah.
Right, and we can tell them if we got it, I mean, I have to say it has to be tomorrow. Because if we got it tomorrow, they said it'd take a couple days, but they could get us stuff even without getting the specifics of the price, which maybe we don't need for purposes of presenting this to the school committee. We have enough information at this point to put it into a couple of slides to explain what the opportunity is, why it would make sense, what some of the timing is of some of this other money coming down the pipe. And I think that's possibly more important than the specifics of this project. I think we can firmly say by under a 5-year lease for these 2 buses, it would not be more than the diesel buses. But we'd still have to provide our own drivers. But we will do that. And thank you. And Thursday is Thanksgiving. So are they sending out Wednesday?
So yes, and I can also share it to the committee digitally. I just think it's really nice to be able to preview that and process a little prior to a meeting, you know?
That is good advice. Okay. All right. Any other questions about the Mass CC grant and the electric school bus opportunity? Okay, on to the next topic, which is I'll just also say police fire harbor view on the Mass CC study. The report came out with an estimate of what it would cost to create a microgrid at the police fire station and harbor view. We have taken that information into account as part of the microgrid Bric grant proposal. And that has been very informative for purposes of developing cost estimates for the components of that microgrid, which would be part of an embedded set of microgrids in the mini grid of the Bric grant proposal. So already being used. Okay, update on 2021 initiatives. Debbie, do you have an update on Go Electric?
No, actually, I don't have a report for tonight.
Okay, that's fine. Just keep doing what you're doing. Town hall renovation. I think we heard from Brian Host last month that geothermal, which was being considered, doesn't have the same subsidies that it used to have, so it's coming in much more expensive than it otherwise would have been. Is there any other update on the town hall renovation from anybody?
Not on the town side.
Okay. All right, and then community solar is a placeholder for trying to understand if individuals within the community can come together and aggregate their purchases such that a solar energy array could be built within the town. I think the most logical, there's 2 logical opportunities for that. One is MBTA station where there could be solar energy arrays that would be big enough to service a broader group of residents if they so chose. And there are people in town who already are buying renewable energy on their bill through financial contracts. This would, if they wanted, allow them to purchase solar energy that is in town. We also could engage in some type of solar community as community solar project as part of the microgrid purchases. But that has been put on the back burner as we resolve some of these other initiatives. And I think that would be a part of these other initiatives, not a standalone basis at this point. Any questions on community solar? All right, we're cruising, man. Let's get updates on the 2020 initiatives. The solar energy RFP. We are incorporating those bids into the microgrid Bric grant. We are also going to enter into conversations with Amoresco about what purchasing batteries would look like, as well as some of the other options that we might want to think about. So that is currently on hold, but we continue to move forward. We frankly are being stymied on that one with respect to roofs. Our roofs are just so not at the right timing right now. They need to be replaced within the next, well, originally it was the next 2 to 3 years, which would have been perfect. And now it's maybe 5 to 8 years away. And that just makes it harder for us to get the best positions in town, but we continue to look at that. We continue to talk with the developers. Any questions about the solar energy RFP and the status and why we aren't moving forward with any of those yet? Okay, community aggregation. Debbie, do you have a report on this? This is normally Steve's. And Brianna, were you there when we got an update from Chris Senior today?
I missed the beginning of the conversation though.
Okay, so I can, so community aggregation, as everybody knows, this was an initiative that has been championed by this committee, and it went forward to the town, who approved the community aggregation plan, first the pursuit of it, and then the actual plan itself. Once the town approved that plan, it went to the Department of Public Utilities, who everybody thought would just do a rubber stamp approval, because there have been plenty of towns that have gone forward with community aggregation under the law. We got stuck at the Department of Public Utilities, partly because of COVID, partly because there are some utilities who are potentially blocking these initiatives. And it has been more than 600 days since we put forward our plan, and we still have not gotten action on it. There are some towns who have been waiting for 900 days. So there's just a roadblock. John O'Rourke of Good Energy sent some of this data to Chris Senior, and Chris Senior sent it along to our representative and said, look, what is going on? This is the law. We've gone forward with this. It's been approved by the town. It shouldn't be taking this long, even with COVID. What do we need to do? So we continue to be in a wait and see place with respect to community aggregation. Any questions on community aggregation?
Tanya,
Yes.
I think in our meeting minutes, I didn't remember this discussion, but in our minutes, it said last month, Steve had reported that, I believe how it was worded, Marshfield and Situate, who are our kind of co-sponsors in this, did not submit all of the information necessary to the DPU. Do you recall any more on that? Or I guess we have to ask Steve for more update.
So, yeah, I think Steve would be the better person to update on that, but he did report, we also had not submitted the right information. So John O'Rourke came back to us and said, we had submitted our plan. The DPU gave us a request for information, and here's what we need to provide. And it was information like, on what date did your town approve the community aggregation plan? I mean, some of it was basic information. So because we have Brianna Bennett, the town was able to turn this around very quickly and resubmit it back. But I think there was a delay with respect to our partners. That should not delay us, even though we're submitted at the same time. But we're behind a lot of other things.
Okay.
And opportunities as well.
Hey, Tanya, you might know the answer to this, but I assume the DPU commissioners are appointed by the governor. Is that right?
That is correct.
Okay. So we just have to find a way to make you a DPU commissioner, huh?
That would be a huge pay cut. But
Okay,
it'd be
someone else raise your
interesting.
hand.
It'd be interesting. And some of my consulting colleagues have gone that path as well. All right, data report. Yeah, I there's obviously lots of ways to get things done, and having friends in high places are part of that. There is obviously something going on. I mean, there's just from a meta, anybody who's in politics can recognize this. And Jean, I think you most certainly can recognize this, not just the politics, but also the legal side of it. You don't get stopped this long unless there's currents going on behind the scenes that are creating this cessation. And I don't know what they are.
Can I just
go ahead, Debbie?
So I don't have any evidence for this, but I have always surmised or thought that the generation side was, that was a cash cow for National Grid. And so basically, they didn't have to, I mean, everybody just went into their program. And somebody told me the other day who works with Frax that National Grid owns 40% or some huge amount of the pipeline in the compressor station. So you said that they couldn't own the generation side, but they own it. So my whole feeling is, and I think people need to really look into this, whether that the reason is they don't want to lose their cash cow, of, just having that generation side or the supply side just be taken care of. And theoretically, they're not supposed to own any of it, but if that is true, that they do own a good part of the Atlantic Bridge project and the compressor station, I think that makes kind of
Right. So let's be distinct. The generation is the electricity generation. So power plants, for example, that is what they're not allowed to own under the restructuring legislation. But National Grid is a natural gas deliverer. And they deliver through the pipelines, and they need compressor stations to do that.
But they
And
also
so-
run that. They also run their plant, by the plant from the plants that are powered with natural gas.
Which plants? They do not own any generation plants in New.
No, but that's where that's part of the mix of where they get. So I just feel like there is, I don't know, there's something in that aspect.
Look, the utilities are always blamed because they're the biggest ones in the room. And that may be what's going on behind the scenes. I think the reality is we don't know. It might be there's legislative changes going on. It might be the governor has decided he doesn't want to back this anymore. It may be there was starting to be a challenge to some of the other policies, right? So I don't want us as a committee to engage in conspiracy theories, but it's fun to surmise what it might be. All we know is we have been waiting for 600 days for more than 600 days for our community aggregation plan to move ahead. And it's very frustrating because Steve championed this initiative and did a fantastic job, and his execution was flawless. And the town was very excited. And we as a committee were ready to help publicize it and make sure that everybody knew what was going on. And we have just been put on ice for much longer than we anticipated.
And I apologize if you said this, Tanya, are there timing requirements by which DPU must make a decision, or is it just once you submit it, you just wait until whenever?
The original estimate was 6 to 9 months.
Okay.
So it was already anticipated to take a while. And again, maybe it's COVID. Maybe at the end of the day, it's just COVID has made things go slower and the dockets take longer. But there's no, got to do it by this. If you don't do it by this, it's automatically approved. That would be nice. Okay. Next up is our data report. And I don't know, Brianna, do you have any information on our electric vehicle charging information?
I do. I actually have a super brief plain Jane presentation that I'm just going to show purely because I want to be able to show you guys some graphs. So this is, I don't usually use PowerPoint. Where's the present button? Honestly, I'll just go through it like this. So this is just a little thing on, did I freeze? Oh, no, I didn't. It's a little thing on the charging stations to show you guys everything that's happened over the past year, rather than just looking at another month of data, because now we've actually had the charging stations for a full year. So this was just a map again of those 5 different locations, 18 ports. 4 locations are being assessed in all of this data, And we're actually excluding the town hall data because the ChargePoint wanted to charge an extra sum of money to get data from that specific station at town hall. So we pay for all the other ones and we don't pay for that one. So you can assume that the data you're looking at is for 16 of the ports. And so, you know, as most of you probably know, we conducted a EV commemoration ceremony back in April, which also had a slideshow. You can check it out on the Alternative Energy Committee's website. Highly recommend those videos. And then these are just the graphs with the trends. So you can see that, you know, in every graph we've been going up over the past year, and it's pretty dramatic. And I broke it down by year, and then I broke that year down not only by days, but by month. So here's sessions over the last 365 days. You can see that the overall sessions, which is that green line, shows that, you know, we have steadily continued to increase the number of sessions that we're sharing in the community. And this is that graph broken down by month. So there's been a decrease. November and October definitely have not been as high as September was, and September in all categories was a peak for us for electric vehicles. So we can see, you know, this is the unique drivers, which has also increased over the past year. Take a look at how low. We had less than 10 people using the charging stations up until March. And then suddenly, you know, we steadily began to climb, and now we don't have 10 people using them. We have closer to 60, 70. This number actually, it says 30, so at least 30. And so this is that number broken down by month. And then we have the energy that has been consumed at these charging stations. And with the increase in energy, I will also say electric cars tend to be 95 to 97% more efficient than combustion engines. And so we can think about, you know, as we're putting more electrical capacity on the grid, this is still removing fossil fuels from the atmosphere. This is the month breakdown. And then I have the graphs on the greenhouse gas emissions that have been avoided. So as you can see, we've steadily increased in those as well. And I do have my favorite statistic of all time at the end of this. We've avoided 16,844 kilograms of greenhouse gas emissions so far, which is equivalent to planting 432 trees and letting them grow for 10 years. So that is pretty amazing. That's a full year accomplishment for Cohasset. And so I just wanted to share that all with you in a more graphic form than me spurting a lot of numbers really fast at you. So as you can see, the trends all look very good for charging.
You better watch out. You might get a job as a consultant in the energy space very soon. So what does that cost the town? Do you have that number? Because I know that's something we need to track.
At 12 cents per kilowatt hour, the past 30 days have cost the town about $380. And so that's the highest price in the last 30 days that there's been. I will say on average, it probably has looked between $100 a month and $250. So, but it is increasing. So now we're looking at something it's getting up to about $400 a month. Corey?
I was just going to say, this isn't statistics, but anecdotally, the first time that I've seen all 4 charging stations being used in the town parking lot was on Tuesday. So all 4 were occupied. I've never seen more than two ever used at one time, but that was pretty cool to see. I think it was a Hyundai, there's a Toyota plug-in, and then 2 Teslas. So it was pretty cool.
Oh, good. I think the next step will be asking customers why they're using the charging stations and trying to figure out why these trends are increasing and when they started, why they started, so we can figure out what to do to get more people to get electric cars.
That is great. And any other questions for Brianna on our electric charging stations? Okay, I want to just say, this is going to sound so cheesy, and I'm going to put it in the chat box. Whenever I am feeling worn down or tired because I'm putting together a PowerPoint presentation for the select board on something we're doing, or feeling down, I go to that cute little video you made about the electric cars. And I have just put that link. It's on our webpage. I just put that link. Corey is featured, and it's such a catchy little tune. It just raises my spirit. So anybody who wants to feel better about life, feel free to use that click. It is better than a podcast pep talk, because it is so cute and it's so well done, Brianna. And I want to thank you for all of that help as well. Okay, I think we are at the end of our agenda. Are there any matters not reasonably known in advance? And by advance, that means within the last 48 hours, something came up that we should talk about, or something that you think we should put on the agenda for our next meeting. All right. This has been a great meeting. I want to thank everybody for participation, for your attendance. I'm very excited to work, Josh, with you, and appreciate your enthusiasm in joining us. And I think, as you can see, there's lots of great things to do. So I'm going to offer to you, Josh, the opportunity to make the motion to adjourn.
I'd like to make a motion to adjourn, but no, thank you. This was totally just inspiring to see what you guys have been doing. And I mean, obviously John's talk was kind of mind blown with all, just all the complexities there. But yeah, thank you for everything you guys have been doing for our town, I guess, in our world, and just glad to be part of it and look forward to really helping out. The net zero stuff, I would love to get into that, with yeah.
Welcome aboard.
With that, yeah. No, I mean, just, if you need help kind of getting that going and trying to, I mean, you obviously have it going. But anywhere I can help, just would love to I got tons of homework for the next meeting, but I look forward to contributing more in the coming months and years, I guess.
Awesome. So
Yeah.
do I have a motion to adjourn from you, Josh?
Yes. Motion to adjourn.
And I'm a
Thank you.
second.
Thanks, Pat.
All
So Josh makes a motion to adjourn, Pat seconds. We don't have to take a roll call vote for this. Everybody in favor? Aye.
Thanks, everyone.
All right. Good
Bye-bye.
night. Thank
Thank
you
you,
again for being
everyone.
part
Thank
of the
you.
team.
Good night.
Bye-bye.